Of all the zipper sets, probably the easiest to set is the invisible zipper. I know what you're saying. Oh no, she can't possibly mean that. I've tried and tried and it was just awful. But I'm going to show you how to do it. And I'm going to show you how to do it with just a basic sewing machine and just a regular zipper foot. Here's one. And see, when you look at it, you don't even see the zipper if you don't look for the little pull. But it's a zipper all right. There it is, lined. That's the inside. And I close it up. And it's pretty much sewn to match. You wouldn't think about a zipper being in there if you didn't see the little tab. This is a regular zipper. When you look at the front of the zipper, you see the teeth. When you look at an invisible zipper, which is what this is, you don't see any teeth. You see them on the back, the same as you see them here. It doesn't look too much different. As a matter of fact, the back of this regular zipper almost looks like an invisible zipper. See this? You can hardly tell the difference, except here's the pull, and you know this is the front of the zipper, and you know that this is the back of the zipper from looking at the pull. All right. This particular zipper has a problem. When you measure the zipper opening here, you find it has a 7-inch opening, all right? When you buy an invisible zipper, you must buy the zipper longer than the opening that you're going to put it in. That's very important to know. You cannot set a 7-inch invisible zipper into a 7-inch opening. You can set it into a 5-inch opening or maybe a 6-inch opening, but you cannot put it into a 7-inch opening. So better that you have a zipper that's way too long like this one than that you have one that's too short, that's only 7 inches like this one. And this is the one I'm going to use to demonstrate today in this video. And the reason I'm going to use this one is because when I looked for invisible zippers in my studio, I found I'd already sewn them into my clothes because they're so easy to set and they disappear and they just look so nice. Before you set an invisible zipper in your garment, it's a very good idea to have a little practice. All right, and what I do with my students is I have them make mock-ups. This is my sample book, and I have them make sample books like it. And this is a mock-up. This shows you the inside of the garment, how it will look, and it's done in paper. I've cut the patterns apart and taped them together so that you can see. This would be how the outside would look, and this is how the inside would look. And then after they've done that, so they understand how it lies together, I have them make an actual mock-up. And here is the mock-up. See? We can turn it over. You see the inside of the zipper. And here's the outside. Okay? And that's what I have them do. Another thing that is important to understand, because I'm showing you how the industry does these things, is that the industry uses varying seam allowances. If you're used to sewing with home sewing patterns, you're used to a 5/8 inch seam allowance on all your seams. The industry doesn't do this. If there's anything that will waste your time, it's 5/8 inch seam allowances. So what you do is you mark them down, and sometimes you make them larger. In this case, here is the sewing line, and you can measure in from the printed edge of your pattern 5/8 of an inch and mark the sewing line, and then mark from the sewing line out 1/8, or you can just add 1/8 to the cutting line. And you see here, so I lay this is a 3/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to cut out the shell. I'm going to forget about cutting the lining for now. I'm going to cut the shell piece out to make the sample. And I'm going to lay the edge of the pattern right against the edge of the cut fabric here. If, by the way, you happen to have selvage running along the edge of the fabric you're cutting, that's a very good idea because it will keep your sample from fraying. When you're making a sample, don't worry about finishing the seam allowances. You don't need to because it's a sample. You're not going to wear it. And besides, you don't need any kind of interference with what you're doing. You want to do just what you need to do to learn how to set the zipper. You can worry about finishing the seam allowances later. So I'm going to cut this out. All right. Down here, I'm going to put a little snip for the zipper notch. That's very important to know where that zipper notch is. And you can put the zipper notch wherever you want. It just has to be shorter than the length of the zipper because the zipper has to be longer than the opening. The zipper notch marks the opening, all right? So below the zipper notch, the seam will be sewn closed. The seam will open from the zipper notch up to the top of the fabric. All right, I'm going to open this zipper tape like this, and I'm going to take my ruler like this, and I'm going to measure right into the gully, and I find that's 3/8 of an inch. And what this means is that in order for this zipper to finish, I'm going to want it to be sewn 3/8 of an inch in from the edge, and the seam allowance will be, the sewing line will be 3/4 right here. So I'm going to mark on the fabric a 3/8 inch line, because that is where the zipper tape will lie in the finished garment or finished sample, whichever you wish to call it. So it'll be like this, do you see? It's going to lie like that against the seam in the garment. That's the way it's going to be. Add 1/8 of an inch to your seam allowance so that you have a 3/4 inch seam allowance. This is what's used in the industry in high-end. High-end clothing have larger seam allowances because it gives access to alterations if needed. A lot of times they're never altered, but the ability is there. This is the side A, and I'm going to write that right on it. The side that I write on is the outside of the garment. That makes it easy to identify it. And this is the shell. The shell, of course, is the outside of the garment. Turn over to produce side B. I'm going to turn it over. This is side B. And this is also the shell. We're not going to worry about the lining right now. It's enough just to learn how to set the shell. Now I'm going to measure in 3/8 of an inch on this side as well. Just draw a line right down like that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and start putting this zipper in. I'm now at the sewing machine, and I looked through my supplies just before I sat down and found that I had a pink invisible zipper. It's pretty long, but it doesn't matter because all that matters is the zipper is too long for the opening. So I'm going to switch to the pink one instead of the purple one because you'll be able to see it better. You do need a zipper foot, and this is the zipper foot I'm going to use. This is called an adjustable zipper foot, and they're sold everywhere. This is a low shank, and this I'm going to put on the machine. This I've got a little featherweight sewing machine here that was built in 1941. You do not need any kind of special sewing machine to do industrial sewing. These are industrial sewing techniques I'm showing you, and I'm using this little machine, and all it does is sew forward and back. So this is the way the zipper is going to be when it's done, but in order for it to be that way, I've got to turn it over this way so it will lie against the marked line here. And what will happen when it's sewn, I'm going to turn this over to show you. You see, it's going to be like that, and that will be the 3/4 inch seam allowance. You can see now that this is going to be 3/4 of an inch from here to here, but we're laying the tape against the marked 3/8 of an inch so that we can make sure that it will come out on 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. And all I have to do is lay that down. Now remember, there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top. When you're setting an invisible zipper in your garment, it may be a 5/8 inch seam allowance if you didn't reduce your seam allowances on your pattern, wherever, but that's where you want to start it, where the seam line will cross at the top. And in this case, it's 1/4, and I can just do that by eye. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stay stitch this in. I'm going to sew right down this side. I'm not sewing in the gully, I'm sewing right on this side, and that's called a stay stitch. I'm putting in a stay stitch so the zipper will stay in place. That's what stay stitch means. And I'm going to put this right down like this. I'm going to lift up the needle, pull the scrap of fabric out a little bit. First you put the needle down, then you put the presser foot down. And now I'm going to sew so that the zipper tape is right along that marked line. And I am sewing with the longest stitch on the sewing machine. This is a sample. This is not going in my garment. If I were sewing it in my garment, I would use a smaller stitch. But it's a sample, and if I make a mistake, because it's sewn with a long stitch, I can rip it out very quickly and then redo the work. I'm going to sew right on down, and I'm going to stop at the notch for the opening. Alright, now I'm going to bring the needle up, and I'm going to bring long threads out from the machine like this. If it doesn't come out, make sure your presser foot lever is up high, and that will help you. Then bring it around. I'm going to turn the whole thing around. And now I'm going to roll the tape out so that it's easier for me to get into the gully. This is tricky. You want to sew right in the gully. It's because you're so close to the teeth, it's easy to catch the teeth. So take your time as you do this. And I'm going to sew right on up to the top. When I get there, I'm going to sew right on into my scrap of fabric, and then I'm going to clip this away. And the next thing I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to hold this threads over because I don't need that to catch in the teeth. And I want to check to make sure that this is sewn well. Take your time when you do this. It can be very confusing. It will look as if it's wrong, and it will actually be right. So you've got to be careful not to decide that you've sewn it wrong, rip it out, and then realize, oh my goodness, I sewed it right, and I've ripped it out. You don't want to do that. Alright, so now I'm going to bring the tape up, the little tab up, right on up to the top, and I see that that's set pretty well. Okay? So now I'm going to take it back down again. Now that I know it's okay, and be careful with these threads because they like to catch in the teeth. We all know about threads catching in zipper teeth. Bring this down further. You can see the advantage of having a zipper that's too long. Of course, this is way too long, but I happen to have it on hand, so there we go. And now, since I know that it's in right, I'm going to pull the threads through on this side. I have to clip here because it won't come through because it's looped there. I'm going to pull them through and tie them because I want to make sure that they don't catch in the teeth. You're just pulling it up, and that way you get this little loop. Come on here. There we go. Alright, and now just tie them together like this. Pull it through. Okay, I'm not going to tie the other one because you get the idea. Now, we've done that side. Now this time, when we started this, we started at the top and we came down, and then we went back up. It's the exact opposite for side B. I'm going to fasten this up so we make sure we get it lined up correctly. As you can see, line B is going to sew like this against this line and then turn back. Right? So we know we've got it right. Okay, I'm going to lay this against here so that the top is even to this. Alright, and now take the pull it right on down. I guess what I really need to do is put a pin in here. Let's see. Okay, that's going to be even. Alright, and here we see, here's the notch. I'm going to mark this so I can see it really well. So we know we've got it even because I'm laying it one against the other, and you can see that it is. There's the notch there, and I'm going to start sewing down here at the bottom. I'm going to leave long threads. I'm pulling the fabric out, and I'm putting the needle down in here. And again, we're going to stitch this in place. In other words, we're going to sew it so that this side of the zipper tape stays in place so that when we sew in the gully, it will be where we want it to be. The reason the zipper tape is on top and the fabric is on bottom is because zipper tapes have almost no give. They're very tight. The fabric has more give. Even on a straight grain, there's still a certain amount of give in there. So you always want, when you're setting a zipper, to have the tape on top and the garment's fabric down to the feed. The feed is the teeth that move the fabric along. So that is why, and that's very important to know, because if you do it the opposite way, you'll have a terrible time setting zippers. Just the top of it. Yes, 3/8, and this is going to be 3/8. That's important. Now, if you have cut to match and you're sewing to match, you don't have to worry. It's going to come out right because you're laying it down so that it's lined up. And as you saw with the window pane skirt, you couldn't even tell that an invisible zipper was in there. The lines matched right up, and it will do that when you make your clothing. So I'm going to sew right on off the edge. I'm going to turn it around, and I am going to roll out the tape so I can sew on the gully. By the way, when you're setting zippers, you want to put them in as soon as possible in making the garment. It's the first thing or the nearest to the first thing possible. Sometimes you need to sew something else before you can set the zipper in, because you can't set the zipper in because it's going to cross a seam or something like that. But you always put the zipper in first, and the reason is because that's the time when you have the least pieces of your garment sewn together, you have the least of the garment under the machine, and giving you the most possible control over setting the zipper. The industry always does this. Zippers go in first. And now here we go. Right down in the gully, I'm pulling it over. You can take this and press it with the iron so that it lays out flat, because some people have a lot of trouble rolling it out. In my case, I tend to get it a little too tight, so I prefer to just roll it out by hand. And if you press the teeth out, as soon as you close the zipper, the teeth go right back into place. So if you press the teeth out to sew side A, then when you close to check it, that means you've got to go back to the iron and press out the teeth on side B. Right, so now I'm coming down to where the notch is, and I'm going to stop sewing right there. There we go. And there, it's set. What do you know? Alright, so now that I know that's okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tie the threads. Now, if you're making a garment, and of course we aren't, we're making a sample. But when you're making a garment, you would set it the very same way. We can pretend that this is an evening dress, and this was a zipper that's going in to the side seam, and this goes all the way down here. Alright, and the zipper has only been set in the opening. The seam has been left open all the way down to the hem. So we've now got to finish this seam. We don't want to sew from the bottom all the way up, because it would be almost impossible to have it come even here. So the trick is we're going to sew down just part way here, and then go to the hem and sew up into the seam here. Because this is very tricky to get right, we want to do that right now and just sew a section down here. We're going to take and put the needle one stitch below where we just stitched. You don't want to go right into this stitch, because that's been sewn. If you stop and think about it, it's stitch and then stitch and then stitch. So we put it here where the next stitch would start. We're going to get the zipper all the way out of the way over here, and we're going to go. So we put the needle, and the needle is just a hair to the left of the previous last stitch. And remember, the seam allowance is 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to sew it on a 3/4 of an inch. We want to make sure here is the tape that marks the 3/4 of an inch seam allowance that I had put on before. And so the edge of the seam allowance is running right along the edge of the tape. All right, and I've just brought it down part way, and we'll pretend that this is the very top of the seam that's not yet finished, so we can sew back up into it. Take this out, we're going to see what we have. So now we check it. We open it, and you can see, perfect. The reason that this is coming out so well is because when I sewed the next stitch, it's over a bare fraction from the previous stitch. And you can see this is only a 1/16 of an inch over to the left of this stitch. It's just a 1/16 of an inch, that's all. But that matters because when the zipper is closed, it takes in a little bit more of the fabric than where the seam is sewn. It's just a little more beyond that. And this seam is lining right up with where the fabric folds into the zipper just above it. And that's the trick. You want to start one stitch below and just 1/16 of an inch to your left of the final stitch that's holding the zipper in place. All right, now that we know that's all right, we want to pull the threads through and we want to tie them. And then we can clip the stitches away. There we go. In this case, we're going to say that this ends here. So what you do with the zipper now is, and I hate to do this because it's a beautiful zipper, but here we go. Cut it off below the zipper notch, okay? And you can make it look even nicer by trimming away a little bit like this, and then you want to stay stitch these sides down. Turn around the other side, and that keeps the loose bottom of the zipper in place. So now what we have is a zipper that's sewn into the shell. It's still open a little bit here, but you get the idea. Now I'm going to show you how to line the invisible zipper set. Because this zipper is centered, the industry would refer to this as a railroad zipper, just in case you want to know that little bit of jargon. And this means that the left side of the lining is the reverse of the right side, which means that I can cut 2 plies at once. I'm just lining it up to make sure it's on grain. Most sewing can be done without pins, and actually pins get in the way a lot of the time. Sometimes pins are just a nuisance. Alright, I'm going to clip here. This is the actual zipper notch right here. And that is just an 1/8 of an inch above this clip that's going underneath. That's going to allow the zipper to fasten, right, so that that gives you the break back. And you see this is going to fold like this in the garment, and this is going to fold like this. You can see the difference. See, there's going to be the 1/8 of an inch that's going to run up. And I have the 3/4 inch gauge right here to make sure I'm sewing right on gauge. So I'm bringing it up just to where the clip is, and I'm going to back tack it there. I'm going to lay this over here so that it's edge to edge, so that I see that it's all lined up and will come out the way it should. The seam, of course, lies over, the lining seam lies right over the shell seam, and this is the way it's going to look when it's done. The zipper is closed. You can see it going together like this. That doesn't even need to be back tacked as long as you sew several stitches beyond where the seam ends on the lining. I'm going to take this side and bring it over to here. Notice it's edge to edge. I drop the needle. Everything with industrial sewing is on gauge. Everything. And what's controlling the gauge here is that this is edge to edge. So at this point, what we have is an invisible zipper that's been set in the shell. It's now lined. What we need to do is finish across the top. Now, this is supposed to be sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top, and I've got 3/8. If that happens when you're doing a sample, don't say, oh my goodness, I've got it 1/8 of an inch too large. This will matter in your garment, but it won't matter in the sample. And not only that, but if you've got it 3/8 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/4 in your garment, you can always put a little hook and eye at the top rather than take it out. But we're doing a sample. Mine's a little bit off. All right, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to show you how to finish it with a 3/8 inch seam allowance at the top instead of a 1/4. What we do now is we turn it over so we got the wrong side, and we lay it so it's edge to edge like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the shell and we are going to pull it all the way around, and we're going to stretch it a little bit. This doesn't sound kosher, but this is what you have to do, okay? So there we've got it, and that's pulled all the way around, and now I'm going to sew across the top, and on this side I've got to go with it this way. You can see one of the reasons why you want to put your zipper in first before you sew anything else. And I'm going to sew across the top. Wait a minute. I've got to leave long threads so that I can tie them. I don't want to back tack because it could make a wad. So I'm going right across on a 3/8 inch seam allowance. This is a 1/4 of an inch width, so it's 1/8 of an inch more, and I know I've got that right. Alright, so now I've turned this. I want to turn this and see how this is. And voila! It's right on the top, right on the edge. And that looks pretty good. So now we still need to do the other side, and again we lay the lining like this, and we bring the shell all the way over, and we pull it as hard as we can. Did you see that it's a little bit short there? You must make it edge to edge. Force it in. Pull that out and leave long thread so I can tie it. But first I want to check this. Now see this here, you don't want this wad in here, so I'm going to just fix that. Fix everything as you go. Something goes wrong, fix it. Don't wait until the next day or whatever to fix something. Fix it right away. And that's all I ever seem to do. I always seem to be taking threads out and fixing. But in the end, you get a much better garment because you fix the mistakes. I found that I don't like to wear garments that have mistakes in them. So I try to keep everything fixed as I go, and it makes clothes last for a long time. Right now I'm going to turn this out, right side out. This one doesn't want to turn as well. So I'm going to take the my snips. There, see, pushing it in, it's coming out all right. All right, now, when I take the pull and take it all the way up to the top, there's no need. I'm not too happy with that. That needs to be a little neater there. Let me see here. See if I can fix it with a stitch ripper to bring it out just a little more. There, that's beginning to look a little better. Sometimes you just have to fix it. Alright, and there you go. And you do not need a hook and eye at the top of an invisible zipper because it will stay closed. The big concern with an invisible zipper is that you not put it in a garment that's going to fit tightly around the body, because invisible zippers will pop open. And that's it, and there's the zipper and it's all set, and that's how you do it. See you next time. We're going to show you how to do some of these things in future videos, so if you're really interested in learning how to sew, keep watching. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel if you wish. That way you'll always be notified, or you can go on my website and sign up for email blasts so that you don't miss any of this. And little by little, you'll find that you'll be sewing very, very well. It is much easier to use industrial methods, the easiest way to achieve professional results. We're going to try and make this information available to you.